greatest performance in NBA history has no video footage. None. Zero. On March 2nd, 1962, Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points in a single NBA game. A record that still stands to this day, and we can't watch it. There's footage of the moon landing, the 1912 Olympics, even Wilt's in high school. But basketball's most untouchable record, all we have is a scratchy radio call and a few grainy photos. So what's going on here? Did he really score 100?
It was a farce of a game.
Is it right to doubt it? I mean, why is there no footage of Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game? Find out this time on Kame 11. To begin, of course, we have to set the stage. The year is 1962, and the NBA is struggling. Bad. Still in its adolescent years, the league, the National Basketball Association, wasn't national yet. There was only one team west of St. Louis, in Los Angeles. And bro, they had it tough. They had it tough. There's actually a book on the 100-point game, written by a professor at my school, Gary Pomerantz. I read the book and chatted with him about it afterwards. Check it out if you get the chance, it's phenomenal. In it, he details the state of the league was so bad that the Lakers dispatched players in sound trucks to Beverly Hills, Hollywood, and South Central LA to give clinics and read from scripts. Please come out to see us. Meanwhile, Wilt Chamberlain was rolling. At just 25 years old, in only his third season, he was already shattering records. In his rookie year, 22 years of age, fresh off a tour with the Harlem Globetrotters, Wilt averaged 37 points a game and won MVP. 2 years later, he became the only player in NBA history to average 50 points a game. By his third season, Wilt could do everything except hit free throws. Despite shooting 17 free throws in a game, 4 more than prime Shaq and 8 more than Shea, he only made 10 of them. That's how dominant he was. He was averaging 50 a game on 50% free throw shooting. But all that didn't matter that much because, well, the league was in dire straits. This video is sponsored by Arena Club. Now, I don't know if you guys are like me, but I was heavy into trading cards back when I was a kid. I used to love Yu-Gi-Oh so much. And whenever I could get my hands on a sports magazine, I would always love seeing the basketball cards in the back. Remember what trading cards felt like? Now imagine that digitally. That's what Arena Club is about. We're able to rip a pack for hundreds of dollars and hit on a card that's worth tens of thousands. It's kind of like FIFA My Team. And with every pack you open, you get an instant offer on your card. And they have super transparent checklists. Whether you're buying, selling, grading, or ripping packs, Arena Club is the best place on the internet to be. In fact, we're gonna open one right now. Let's check it, man. Okay. Show me some. Oh, Orlando Shaq. Look at that. Oh, turn me up. How much we getting? Right now, you can get 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/KipKame and use code KipKame. Thanks to Arena Club for sponsoring this video. The way that Gary put it to me when we spoke was that the NBA was a lounge act league, or even worse, the Pro Bowling League. Seen as a warm-up for the more popular college basketball, which was already embroiled in point-shaving scandals in the 50s, then a decade later, a huge gambling scandal that involved 50 players over 20 states. So obviously, not the greatest look for hoops. Then you have the NBA, where the Philadelphia Warriors, the team that Wilt Chamberlain played for, played a game in a high school gym against an expansion team, Chicago Packers, who later became the Washington Wizards. High school gyms. It wasn't looking too hot for the league. On the other hand, Wilt Chamberlain was the hottest commodity on the block. Coming out of high school, he was arguably the greatest athlete in the world. There's a reason that we have footage of him at 17 years old and not when he scored 100. It may have just been the case that Wilt Chamberlain had more motion than the entire NBA combined. By the time he left the University of Kansas in Lawrence, as a college junior, he'd been on Time Magazine, Life, and Newsweek. When he left KU, he sold a story to another magazine called Look, called Why I'm Leaving College, for $10,000. At the time, the average yearly salary for an NBA player was $9,000. And the reason that Wilt left college wasn't to go to the NBA, no. It was to join the Harlem Globetrotters. See, the Globetrotters were more clouded than the NBA at the time. While the league struggled to get an audience in Los Angeles, the Globetrotters, trotted the globe. That kind of freedom appealed to Wilt, and so did the money. It's alleged that during a track meet at KU, because Wilt did do track as well as basketball, and very well, I might add, the manager of the Globetrotters, Abe Saperstein, offered Wilt a third of the team if he joined. While it wasn't quite that Wilt eventually signed with, it was still $65,000. More than double the highest paid player in the NBA at the time, Bob Cousy, was paid. That's equivalent, by the way, to today's terms at about $719,000. During this tenure, Wilt and the Globetrotters toured the Soviet Union, in the heat of the Cold War no less, and entertained one of their top government officials. When Wilt decided to go to the NBA after a year with the Globetrotters, he became the highest paid player in the NBA, and still took a 50% pay cut, $30,000. That's the same amount of money that the owner, Eddie Gottlieb, used to buy the Philadelphia Warriors Wilt's new team just 8 years earlier. And of course, that sum was worth it. I mean, we're talking about Wilt, no glaze. The average attendance per game jumped from about 6,000 a game to 8,000, a 33% increase. Wilt won Rookie of the Year and MVP, and the team went from 32-40 to an almost 50-win team. But the point still stands. Even with one of the world's most intriguing athletes, the kind to have a CBS, then Paramount News feature at the age of 17, the NBA was still in the trenches. In the mid-1950s, the NBA still hadn't yet turned 10. Broadcasting on television began about a decade prior, which included boxing, tennis, baseball, even college basketball, but that was in 1939. The NBA came in existence in 1946, so they were already lagging behind. And the league, once established, did itself no favor before the birth of the shot clock in 1954. In 1953, in a game between the Boston Celtics and Syracuse Nationals, both teams had 106 fouls and shot 128 free throws in one game. Because when you're winning back then, you just hold the ball until the other team fouls you. It's called freezing. The leading scorer, Bob Cousy, had 50 points, and 30 of them were off of free throws. He's the only guy who had over 5 made field goals on either team. A year later, and in the 8th season of the NBA, they scored their first ever national television deal with a company called Dumont Network, one of the first TV stations in America. They did children's programming, soap operas, and televised NFL games, even when, quote, relatively few people in the 1950s knew or cared about professional football. So the NBA, looking for a contract, signed with the Dumont Network for 13 regular season games on Saturdays for $39,000, or about $470,000 in today's money. Now, if you remember my last video on sports TV history, then you remember the origin of the dreaded blackout, stemming from around this era. For those who haven't yet watched the video, you should go watch it, it's tough. Or just need a refresher, blackouts in sports were created to help franchises protect their gate receipts. In other words, making sure that people in the city the game was being played in couldn't watch it on TV, so they would actually go to the games. I've already talked about how that doesn't make any sense now, but there was some validity to the notions. I mean, Boston Celtics owner Walter Brown noted in 1959 that Celtics playoff games, if they were shown on TV, would literally have their attendees from over 12,000 to under 5,000. Owners kinda had a reason to be afraid. The issue was, though, that they were too scared. In the 13 games with Dumont Network, the first ever, NBA owners wanted the projected worst game of the week to be shown on Dumont, because they were afraid that if the best games were shown, it would negatively affect the gate or tickets for that game. So if you wanted to watch the NBA back in the day, you'd be stuck with the worst game, maybe like twice a month on a Saturday. Tough luck. That's tough. After the first season ended, Dumont went bankrupt, and NBC swooped in to lock in the NBA into a 7-year deal until 1962. NBC had much more reach nationally than Dumont did, but that didn't end up mattering. Prior to the 1962 season, NBC booted the NBA due to lukewarm ratings. The Saturday afternoon performance of 9.6 million viewers versus the NFL at 15 million viewers wasn't good enough to justify the contract, and it was at the very tail end of this contract where our story begins. The absolute best the NBA doing at the time was 13 garbage Saturday regular season games, which, if we take a look at that fateful day, March 2nd, 1962, we might have had a shot at broadcast. The Philadelphia Warriors were the second best team in the NBA out of 9, but the Knicks were dead last. Wilt just a few days ago had hung 67 on their head, and they were pretty defeated. Not only that, but it was 5 games out to the playoffs. Even Bob Cousy, by the way, back then was saying that the last 2 months of the regular season don't matter. So to say the least, it was waffles. Attendance had waned for the Warriors since the first season of Wilt, and people didn't really see his 50 points a game as impressive.
Oh, he's 7 foot tall, of course he's gonna score a lot.
Seemed to be the sentiment. That being said, it was still supposed to be at least a little exciting. Wilt had damn near 80 just a few months before, and it was figured around the league that Wilt was gonna have 100 at some point in the season. Elgin Baylor, the holder of the NBA single game scoring record until Wilt broke it in 1961, said the 100-point game was gonna happen real soon. And even if that wasn't the case, I mean, we're talking about Philadelphia and New York, 2 of the biggest cities in the US. I mean, there had to be like at least some cameras there, right? Well, that's the thing. They didn't play in Philadelphia or New York. They played in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Yes, like the chocolate. The guy who made Hershey, Milton Hershey, started out his company there. And what Detroit was for Ford in the 50s, Hershey was for Hershey. Pretty much everyone in the town worked for Hershey chocolate in one way or another. So why were they playing there? In a place that Wilt's teammate described as reeking of chocolate? Well, it's because, the NBA was broke. And what seemed to be the most broke owner was the Warriors' Ed Gottlieb, or Gotti for short. Gotti was notorious for being cheap. One time, a GM asked to attend one of the Warriors games. Gotti told him that they were sold out, but he could bring his own chair to the arena and sit down. That's what he did. Gotti made sure that every player on his team paid off their hotel phone bills, which most of the time were just 20 cents. And whenever he went to MSG for a game, he made sure to get there just past 6 p.m. because that's when the parking meters reset, right? If they made it before 6 p.m., he would tell his driver to just go around the parking lot in circles until it was past 6. Y'all know someone like that, right? Now imagine, that's the owner of an NBA team. Too much. Too much. Now, we've already clarified, the NBA had no motion at this time, right? Like, no motion, zilch. The Lakers literally moved to LA from Minneapolis, and the players had to go out in the streets advertising their games to citizens. Imagine Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Magic Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, LeBron James going out in the street and asking people to come to their game. That's why we have to respect our elders, man. Come on, even if they don't respect us. Nobody really cared for the NBA like that. Thanks to the no shot clock in early years, limited national coverage, and also teams being in random cities like Cincinnati and Syracuse. Because of this, teams would often take on the practice of playing games in other cities. The most grimy of them being the aforementioned Warriors game in the high school Indiana gym. Boston would play in Rhode Island, Los Angeles would play in Portland and Seattle, and Philadelphia would play in Hershey, Pennsylvania. You might be saying right now, hold on, Kip, aren't they trying to grow the league? Why would they go to Hershey, Pennsylvania? Like, why not Baltimore or DC? Well, I told y'all Gotti was cheap, right? Gotti was cheap. The reason they went up to Hershey was because the owner of the arena gave Gotti a free resort trip in exchange for training camp and some games being played there. Yeah, sold him out for some water slides. The Warriors had already played there a few times in the regular season, and it really wasn't the most pleasant of places. One of the Knicks players, coming there for the first time, said it was kind of like being in a coal mine. And imagine, the fans that were there in the stands, some 4,000, weren't even there for the basketball, believe it or not. The Philadelphia Eagles also did training camp in Hershey, and one of the big attractions was the NFL players playing a basketball scrimmage. The NBA game just happened to be the second half of the doubleheader, damn near an afterthought. Now, not only was the game an afterthought, but so were the Knicks. In the 15 or so years of the league's existence, New York's team was buns all throughout, despite being the biggest market in the country and having their own games televised on New York TV. There were still much bigger names in town, namely the New York Yankees. The Yankees in the 20th century are probably the most clouded franchise in sports history. You can fight with me on that in the comments. New York revolved around the Yankees. And all the sports writers and photographers that published in papers like the Times and such were on go for any piece of Yankees info that they could find. On the flip side, the NBA oftentimes wouldn't even show up in the newspapers, the entire league itself. And a lot of that had to do with the Knicks being trash. I mean, yeah, they were bad for, let's look, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 80s, 2000s, half the 2010s. Bro, I don't condone what New York fans are doing right now, bro, but like, I can understand, damn. There was speculation in some of the materials that I referenced that the reason the NBA wasn't a visible league was because the Knicks weren't good. And this was due to the owner, Ned Irish, being, quote, so abrasive and irritating to the other owners that he was unable to get their help in building a strong franchise. That and ill-advised trades and poor drafting helped doom the Knicks in the mid-1950s. Don't that sound familiar? So with it being one of the last 5 games of the season, the Knicks being garbanzo, the 2-hour drive from Philadelphia to Hershey, let alone New York, on a Friday evening, in order to take some pictures or write about this game, well, I mean, that's a tough sell. That's a very tough sell. But listen, March 1962 was the start of Yankees spring training. They had won the World Series the year prior. So every sports writer in New York was there in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and everyone else was covering the newly minted New York Mets. The Knicks reporter for the New York Post, Leonard Coppett, already knew that the Knicks were buns. Before the season, he predicted they would be in last place to end the season, and there they were, in last place. Beyond him and a few other people, the press in New York didn't really care for basketball because they thought they were freaks and played in short shorts. So, yeah, Yankee player Roger Maris was the focus of all of the New York sports scene. He broke Babe Ruth's home run record last season and was now a free agent. He was asking for $80,000 a year, the most any Yankee had been paid since Joe DiMaggio and Babe Ruth. And that day, a deal was struck. Maris would be paid $72,000. The deal broke at 10:30 in the morning. The Post had other later editions, but that was the biggest news that could have possibly been broken in New York that day. What purpose was there now to go to Hershey, Pennsylvania, where the stadium was cold and not even half full? So yeah, all the New York press were in Florida. There were 2 Philly sports writers from secondary publications, but they hadn't brought their typewriters because their deadlines were later on that night. So there was no proper way to telegraph this game. Oh, and for TV broadcast cameras, Please, bro, please. In this drafty wartime era arena, there was no way for broadcast television, still a technology less than 2 decades old, to be installed in Hershey. The only way that games would be broadcasted would be through radio. And even that was a stretch. The legendary radio announcer Bill Campbell did pretty much everything Philadelphia sports, but even he barely wanted to be there. The drive was long, and he thought that nobody would even remember the game that was played. But he had a job to do, I guess. Broadcasters would bring their own tapes and use them to record and then re-record. Bill Campbell was no different that day. All by himself, he would set up his equipment, record for the local area, and then for the next game, the engineers back in Philly would record over the tape all over again in order to save money. It's the reason we don't have a full recording of the entire game. Only the fourth quarter, which just happened to be captured by a Warriors fan at UMass Amherst, a 20-year-old college student who had missed the game, but heard that the Philadelphia radio, the WCAU, was gonna do a rerun of just the fourth quarter at 3 a.m. So we stayed up till 3, recorded the tape, and like a week later, forgot about it. Yeah, seriously. And to this day, that's the only audio proof we have of the game. Is it starting to make a little bit of sense now? Well, come on, let's keep going. The game's about to start. Before the game, like I said, there was barely anyone there for the game that was being played. There was allegedly around 4,000 people in attendance, but Gotti, the owner, was notorious for jacking up the numbers. The starting center for the Knicks, Phil Jordan, was out because he was drinking too much the night before, so they put in their backup center, Daryl Imhoff. Now, this was barbecue chicken for Wilt, but that wasn't gonna be the reason that he scored 100. The real reason had to do with the children of Hershey. So when the circus came to town, the clowns would use springboards or trampolines that some kids like Kerry Ryman would borrow and take to the empty sports arena. The boys would then use the springboards to jump up high and dunk like they were Wilt Chamberlain. But because they were kids, they were, kind of short, so they had to hang on the rim before they jumped down. Naturally, doing this over and over and over again made the rims really weak and flimsy. There was probably no maintenance done to them, so Wilt's free throws, which he normally hit at a 50% clip, jumped up to 72% at Hershey Sports Arena. The rim was very kind, and it allowed for what was about to happen next. The game started out kinda ho-hum for Wilt. The Warriors took a 19-3 lead, while Wilt scored the first 13. By half, he had 41. A little bit out of the ordinary, but nothing too crazy for Wilt. The biggest fact of the half, though, was that Wilt Chamberlain was 13 for 14 from the line. Why? Well, that season, Wilt had taken to shooting free throws underhanded, and it was working. His career average of 51% took a rise to 61%. And on these rims, man, it was hella green. When Wilt had 60 points in the third, Bill Campbell, the radio announcer, who was just rattling off random stats, just ready for the game to be over with, started to wonder. The end of the third quarter, where, with 69 points in the bag for the Dipper, as he was called, the dad of a Warriors fan in the stands told his son, "Hold on right here. I'm gonna go get my camera." That dad was Associated Press photographer Paul Vathis, who just last year shot 2 US presidents, John F. Kennedy and Dwight Eisenhower, in a Pulitzer Prize-winning shot at Camp David. The guards told him to put up the cameras, but Vathis didn't listen and got a historical photo. Paul, who was just taking his son Randy out to the game as a treat, had the chance to take another. Thinking that Wilt was gonna break the scoring record again and get 80, he rushed to his car to get his camera. The fourth quarter began. The Warriors were up by like 20, but Wilt had almost 70. As the game continued and the Knicks tried their best to keep him from scoring, Wilt came up the court and drained a 20-foot jumper in 1962 for the scoring record, 79 points. At this point in the game, he was 24 for 26 from the free throw line. When Wilt scored his 81st point, the game announcer, the legendary Dave Zinkoff, or Zink as he was known, roared it across the arena. And it was at that time that Wilt and all the other players on the court realized how many points he had. There were 7 minutes left to play. Wilt had been this close before. In high school at Overbrook, they played the Roxborough High Indians in a dingy arena that woefully fell short of regulation. We're talking like 30 feet shorter than a normal court. Wilt had 26 at the half, and at the end of the third, he had 57 to Roxborough's 13. Wilt's coach started feeding the ball to him, and everyone thought he was gonna get 100, but his coach just couldn't commit. They were up over 100, and Wilt had 90. It was just too much. The coach subbed out Wilt with 5 minutes remaining, and the final score was 123-21. Frank McGuire, Wilt's coach for the Warriors, had no such mercy. Wilt was the biggest ticket in the NBA up to this point, meaning that he was not going to sit down. So with 81 points, up 20, it didn't matter. With a few more free throws and so-called dipper dunks, Wilt had 87 with 5.5 left to play. At this point, the Knicks, down 23, started to run out as much clock as possible to keep Wilt from scoring. They were hella salty. They started fouling other players in order to keep the ball from going to Wilt. The Warriors then, in retaliation, started fouling the Knicks to keep them from running down the clock. This back and forth stretched out the game, and Wilt hadn't scored in 6 possessions. He had 89 with 3:23 left on the clock. At this point, Darrell Imhoff had fouled out. He played for 20 minutes. The Knicks were doing whatever they could to stop Wilt. One of the players, when Wilt went up for a dunk, grabbed him by the waist and pulled him down. It was like that, but it wasn't enough. With a bevy of foul shots, fadeaways, dunks, he was at 98. The final bucket, with 46 seconds to go, Joe Rucklick, straight off the bench, hit Wilt right under the basket, and he hit his signature dipper dunk. Some say the game stopped right there, others say that it was finished out. But all that matters is that it happened. All 4,000 rushed from the stands and congratulated Wilt. However it ended, and Wilt went back to the locker room. Now, because there are only 2 writers, 1 off-duty photographer, and 1 play-by-play guy, there was still a lot of media to cover. So who did? That would be Harvey Pollack, Philadelphia's statistician, and that night, pretty much everything else. Normally his nickname was the Octopus, because it seemed like he was always doing 8 jobs at once. This guy was a real hustler. He even worked for the Parks and Rec of Philly. But this night, he actually had 8 jobs. He telegraphed accounts of the game in real time to the Philadelphia Inquirer, the United Press, and Associated Press. On top of being the Warriors' publicist and game statistician. He did a lot. But when the game finished, it still didn't feel like enough. Wilt Chamberlain, exhausted for 1, not sleeping at all the night before, and 2, from being battered around all game, went back to the locker room to drink some milk. He was a milkman after all. Paul Vathis, the AP photographer, was also there, and he took some shots of Wilt's final buckets. But the camera he used didn't have a lot of film, and he had a hunch that he needed some for the postgame. So he made his way to the locker room and was trying to think of something that would stick with people. It was then when Harvey Pollack said to him, "How about I write 100 on a piece of paper, give it to Wilt, and you snap a photo?" That was a great idea, thought Paul. So that's what happened. After that day, Wilt went on a few TV shows that celebrated his 100 points, and it seemed to be common knowledge in America that Wilt Chamberlain did score 100.
Could you be possibly... Oh, could you be a very tall man? Could you?
He could be.
You know I know what it is.
Wilt is still
Points in a game,
all by himself. 100 points in one game, which...
But remember, the NBA really didn't have motion. Despite those 100 points, there wasn't any callbacks to it, not 1 year after, not 2, 5, even 20. It was only 25 years later that the NBA made any real attempt to reclaim part of their history. And this was after Larry, Magic, and Jordan had saved the league. But at that point of Wilt's game, there was nothing to save. There weren't any TV cameras in Hershey, Pennsylvania, period, to be honest, at that time. And the league didn't even have the radio tape. There was something uncovered by a Philadelphia fan who used a dictaphone or something to record just the Warriors' possessions because he had limited tape. Then it was the 20-year-old UMass student who stayed up till 3 in the morning to re-record the tape. That's how it was back then. The NBA was a stagecoach league. No one cared about it. I mean, think about it. This game happened in a chocolate factory town as a follow-up to a Philadelphia Eagles basketball scrimmage. It makes me think, in the year 2025, the Milwaukee Bucks and Indiana Pacers played on NBA TV for the playoffs. Same energy. Gary told me that back then, only things that mattered were televised. The moon landing, global events, not Game 75 in a regular season, with a last place team playing in no man's land on a Friday night. That's why we don't have footage. Wilt was mad about that at first.
I used to hate the fact that there was no video of it, but as time goes on, I think it kind of adds to the mystique of the game.
Mystique. That's what that game and Wilt Chamberlain will always be. And to be honest, don't you think it's better that way? Thanks for watching.